the more you are on social media, you recognize like it's already like a digital society of thought forms. It's like a digital dimension which your mind can link into to then create or design reality from like what you're consuming. That's literally how this stuff is working at this point in time because like I said, if you go outside, you'll recognize that the world around you is still very stable. It's put together. People are nice. Everything's working out. There really isn't that much crime. Everything's pretty good. Especially if you're watching this video, like you even can just access the internet and watch videos in your free time and like probably go to work or do whatever. And like you've already recognized that life is this stable thing. But yet when you log online, it's always this perpetual new threat. Some new bad thing's gonna happen. This new law that's being passed is like this one's gonna be the thing that ends us all because da 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 da. But none of this stuff ever affects us. Ever. It just it doesn't ever affect you. And I think that that's where you would want to start to actually take control of your consumption of media is to think actually like when you're consuming your content, not like, does this content make me feel good or any of that? Like, because you can consume stuff that doesn't make you feel good, which can be beneficial. But like, is this idea, is this belief system which this content is coming from, does it actually like help aid me in like building the kind of life that I want? Stemming from those belief systems embedded within like the content? Do I want to actually install these belief systems into my mind? I think that if you like look at everything that you swipe on, you'll recognize like there's no value, no value, no value, no value. And it's basically this like swiping mode that you get into, like a type of fatigue syndrome where you're just like bored, nothing to do. And so you just like swipe random shit into your mind and time goes by and like that's really all you do is you just waste time. And so personally, I've been trying to cut back on my like mindless swiping. And I think that it's been benefiting me a lot because in replace of those like actions, then I try to do something that's a bit different. So like I'll design things, I'll build websites, I'll do coding. And I think that if everything that you do, if you just find like a negative behavior or something that doesn't serve you and replace it with something that does, even if you like what you replace it with doesn't have to be this substantial thing. It could be like going on a walk or just avoiding the negative behavior. If you just like don't do that and just do nothing by default, it's better than like doing the negative thing, right? And so consuming your content consciously, trying to actually like think about like what are you actually building your life from? What ideas are you putting into your mind? And how is that actually orchestrating your reality right now? Those are all really important things to recognize about like how life is being built for you. Because there's a lot of things that you just like you're doing your own thing or whatever, and you'll recognize that this behavior that you're enacting out is coming from like this place in which you've always done this. And if you start to actually like find out where this belief was installed, where this behavior started, you'll recognize that we're always holding on to past patterns that come from like points in time which feel like ancient to us. And I think you really can just like modify the behavior, like switch it off and just like go in a different direction by just stopping the connection to what you're what you were doing and just doing something different. And so that's really what I try to do whenever I notice like some like negative behavior that I'm like starting to actively engage within, which is like unconscious in some way. The first thing you can do is like to just stop the behavior and then just like do another one. Because that's like the most logical linear progression of how that would need to have happened in the first place, right? Before you actually change something, it has to be changed in a different direction or stopped or just moved slightly. And so I think a lot of like what content has started to become is like all this self-development content is all about like change your life, change your reality, do this and that. But there's never any action embedded within it because content creators just create content so you can like watch the next video about how to be inspired about how to change your life, but you never really do anything. And so like, well, what's the point of just like watching videos that make me feel good? I'd rather just like start building or designing my reality. I think that's definitely an issue with social media influencer types. We all want to like create meaningful content, for people to like help them in some way. But when all we're doing is like providing like a dopamine hit for people to feel good about taking action when they're actually not taking action, they're just watching a video. It's kind of like, well, defeats the whole point. And so consuming your content consciously, actually like trying to engage with information where it's coming from and like how you're actually forming a relationship to the content itself is a good thing. I mean, you have to do that. There's a number of creators that I follow that basically every time they post a video, I watch it. And I've now built off my own identity from the identity of other people and how like they operate. And it actually does actually benefit me in terms of like inspiring me to become that archetype of like this collection of all these different people. I think that we're all sort of doing that in a lot of ways. Is like we have different like muses and role models and people that we follow. And so we're just like drawing upon inspiration from others to build our own self. And then like that self we can package and market in a different way. And that's cool. And so creating content and consuming content, it's kind of weird they go hand in hand in the sense that the more that you create content for yourself, you also recognize that you'll start to appreciate how other people create content because you'll see that it's not actually that easy. They make it look easy, but it's not really that easy. I mean, it's not easy. You have to really think about this stuff, especially if you want to do it in a way which is, like I said before, somewhat conscious. Because content is just, I don't know, it's so easy to create content, but it's hard and difficult to create content which is meaningful. And the end user is always the one that decides whether something's meaningful or not. And that's something that you'll never be able to engineer. And all the creators that I follow, I don't think that they even think about this stuff in the first place. I don't think they think about how they're engineering content. I think they just are authentically themselves. And just whenever they upload a video or get inspired to make a video, they just push it out there. And then people who resonate with that just watch. And so I've been personally trying to deconstruct that process a bit more for myself as I'm starting to consume content about how to create content. And I think that's a good natural switch up to what I was trying to talk about earlier, which is your current state of who you are now. You're like this local sphere of all this potential. And if you just stay in this sphere of potential and don't actually do anything with it, then you don't really know like what you actually are because you haven't practiced anything to like test who you are. And so you have to actually go out there into the world and do things in order to actually find out like your loopholes and your bugs and different aspects of yourself that need to be worked on. So then you retreat back to your bubble and then actively work on that and then go out to the world again and try it out and then go back. We're always in these modes where we go out into the world and go back into ourselves to like remap and rehash things and reformat our being. And we go out into the world again, ideally with more skills, with a better way and a new knowledge system to move through. And so it's really important to think about this kind of stuff and actually try to create content in a conscious way, which allows people to go on that process themselves. And so I've been thinking about how to create content which actually engages people to want to go live their life. Because it it's kind of counterproductive to making content because you want to loop people into the funnel of like what you're doing so they help build your brand. But truthfully, I just want people to go and live their lives because when I think about that's probably the best way that we would design a collective reality together where we don't really have to talk too much about it. We don't have to like idealize or philosophize about it. Like we just all naturally go our own ways. And this natural interweaving of everything that's supposed to happen just happens and it's fine. But it does seem like we need some type of mediator between ideas and the world that's changing. And so perhaps we'll play that function. But there's just a lot of things that are changing in this world. And I think that there's so many bubbles of communities that are being formed. But when I look at a lot of the communities that are being formed about like, let's call it like the red pill, the blue pill, the purple pill, all these different pills, like I said in my previous video, all these sub communities of sub communities are just creating their own echo chambers of like ideas that aren't really connected in any like substantial way. They're just content. It's just content which has a map to, yes, this is how reality is working on some level, but there's always like a deeper level to how reality is actually operating, which doesn't seem like there's any community for that, or at least the communities that are talking about that are like super schizophrenic and crazy and you don't want to listen to them anyway. So creating content, consuming content, and becoming aware of like what you're actually doing when you're like on the internet, I think is a really important thing that you should definitely try to consider more of. Like how the content that you're consuming is building out your identity and whether or not that's actually benefiting you or not.